So here we are with chapter 13. This is going to be our first unit where we're going to be taking some notes on the text, which we're going to call NORTs. I don't know, kind of interesting name, I guess. Any case, what I'm going to ask you to do is turn to your book. You're going to notice that my page looks a little different than yours. And the reasoning behind that is that I have the 10th edition. So there's going to be some similarities. I don't have a digital version of the exact text, but certainly the idea is going to be the same. So we're taking notes on our readings. Now you can be doing this on a note paper, a 3-ring binder, but I'm going to ask you at some point to put this into your computer so that I can look at it as you do it in live format, in live version, so I can make comments on exactly what you're doing. Can't do that. So if you're doing this on note paper, fine, but you're going to have to rewrite it. It's not a bad thing to do. And again, the whole purpose of this summer assignment is to, of course, get you going and learning some of the biology before we get started. But most importantly, it's to teach you how to actually gather information and understand it. Reading is studying if you do it the way that I'm going to show you. So we're looking at chapter 13. You should have your book open. Again, the picture looks a little different than what you're seeing if you have it open. If you don't, please stop me and open it up. But just going to scroll down. The words are essentially the same. Okay, same material. Now, what you're going to do is you see there's a title to the chapter, chapter 13. And you may say to yourself, why am I starting on chapter 13? And the reasoning is I have a master plan of how I want to teach this to you. And the plan is based on the idea that there is definitely some macro, big ideas that we have to understand that are always tied to micro understandings. So we constantly have to think in terms of that. So I'm starting you with a concept. We're going to get to evolution, but we have to have some little bit of basics of some other important tiny facts, micro understandings before we get to some macro. So there's a reason for my madness, and you'll see this eventually as you start seeing the big pictures as the pieces come together, hopefully for you. So I'm taking my Meiosis and Sexual Life Cycles, chapter 13, and I'm going to make some notes, okay? So I'm going to go to my paper. This could be my Google Doc. And I'm going to put this out, and you notice I put that there, Chapter 13, Meiosis and Sexual Life Cycles. This is a major title in my note-taking. This is going to tell me exactly where I am. Now, when you look at your notebook, or I'm sorry, when you look at your textbook, you're going to see key concepts, and this is very important. Every chapter is going to start with key concepts and telling you exactly how they're or what they're going to say and how they're going to describe their voice. See, the whole point of this is to figure out exactly what they're trying to say to you. It's not just information. There's concepts, and they're building a case. They're describing, they're voicing their way of teaching to you. Any case, important are these key concepts. You're going to write them down. As you go through the unit, you'll see 13.1 is going to start after this intro paragraph, 13.1. And when you get there, you're going to write that entire. So anytime you see a number and you see a concept, that's an important concept. And you're going to write that down word for word. This is not about copying just words and sentences and paragraphs from the book. You have a book. You don't need to transcribe it. The monks did that centuries ago. We don't have to do that. I'm trying for you to kind of connect the dots here in your reading. Try to connect your understandings. So they're telling you the key concepts right from the beginning, and although it looks a little different on the text that you're looking at, they're listed to you on the left-hand side there, and there are 4, 13.1 to 13.4. These are the 4 major concepts. It's not just information, it's understanding here, okay? And again, man, they're tied in many different ways. So we're going to go back and forth with different chapters of understanding. You may have to do them on your own to get, again, your bearings. So the first thing that I'm going to write, well, the first thing I'm going to look at, normally in these chapters, they're going to tell you what their game plan is. So we need to understand some of these words. So if I look at the first thing, variations in a theme, that's a title. So I'm going to put that down into my notes as well. Okay? Again, this part is word for word. So I'm going to put variation of a theme or variations of a theme. So I'm going to write that down, variations of a theme, as you should too. All right. Now, what does that mean? Well, we're going to figure this out. And there's many ways to do this. I'm not asking you to do it exactly like me, but there are some things you definitely have to have some structure. Of course, you're trying to put this in your own words, so it's not going to be the same, but the major structure is based upon the titles and the paragraphs and the key concepts. So variations of a theme, what are they after in this paragraph? Well, we read the paragraph. First of all, we see some things in bold. Okay, so the question, and I know you can read, but since I'm just trying to show you how we do this, I'm going to read with you. We all know that offspring resemble their parents more than they do unrelated individuals. If you examine the family members shown in figure 13.1, okay, now I know again the wording in the beginning is a little different than what you have, but just stay with me. You can pick out some similar features among them. The transmission of traits from one generation to the other is called inheritance or heredity. So you see something in bold, that's a vocab word, and the vocab words are going to get hot and heavy in this course. So you're going to hear these words again and again. So I'm going to write down heredity. So again, we see a vocab word, we're going to write that. And we're going to try to put this in our own. So the transmission of traits. And again, if you're stuck with using their words, that's okay here. It's really the concepts, the 13.1, 13.2, 13, these things that you're going to really have to put your own words. If you're not ready to put the vocab words in your own words yet, that's okay. But, so heredity, because you're still learning, transmission of traits from one generation to the next is called inheritance or heredity. So I'm going to go back to my notes, okay, and variations of a theme. What are they talking about? Well, they're talking about, well, before we get to heredity, they're talking about that what? Children are what? Similar. All right. And you'll see that I am not a good speller, but I'm trying. Children are similar, okay, but different. Why is that? Well, we're going to get to that variations of a theme. That's basically what they're after in that picture. But we're going to come up with our first definition, okay? And what we get there is we get heredity. So we're going to write that somewhere. I'll put that here. And again, how you exactly put it down is not important as long as it has some kind of structure. So heredity. All right, and what did we say it was? Well, heredity is transmission of traits. Okay, now transmission means what? When you transmit, you send. You're sending signals. It's a one way of passing. Okay, what? Traits. Okay, characteristics. You know, like hair color, from one generation to another. And you're right. For those that are saying, man, this is going to be time consuming, you bet it is. But that's what learning isn't fast. You're not just reading words here. Okay. So what else do they go on to say? Okay. And you might want to make the heredity, you want to make this bold. Okay. Not sure if I can do this in this program that I'm showing you, but that's okay. And however, sons and daughters are not identical copies. We know that sons and daughters are not identical, but they are similar. Along with inherited similarity is also variation. Okay, now of course you may not have to, variation is a very easy understandable word, but normally speaking, if you run into a word you do not know, okay, you should, whether it's in bold or not, try to give that a definition. I think variation is something we all know. What are the biological mechanisms leading to the family resemblance evident among the family members in the photo? The answer to this question eluded biologists until the advance of genetics to the 20th century. Okay, so now we have the word genetics. Okay, and this is probably a word you do not know, is the study of the heredity and the variation. We just talked about this. Okay, scientific study of heredity. So you might want to put that down as well. Okay, and genetics will have more meaning as we get into more details. All right. So we'll learn. So now this second paragraph here, or in this case in your book, it's the last paragraph. So they get into a little more genetics with talking about DNA in your book. And in fact, they say genetics is the scientific study of heredity and hereditary variation. In this unit, we'll learn about genetics at multiple levels. I'm reading right from your book, from organisms to cells or molecules. On the practical side, you'll see how genetics continues to revolutionize medicine. So they're giving you some background. Okay, but what I want you to understand here is at this point, whether I'm in this part of the book that I'm reading or the book that you're reading, which essentially is the same, they're giving you a basically a guideline of how they're going to attack the unit. Okay, so look how they said we begin by examining how chromosomes pass from parents to organism. In your book, it says we begin our study of genetics in this chapter by examining how chromosomes pass from parents to offspring in sexual reproducing organisms. So this is very important, and you're going to go back to this because when you're done with this chapter notes, this NORT here, note taking, you make sure that you can now understand what they're talking about. They're giving you a game plan. So let's go read this together. I'm going to read it from your book. We begin our study of genetics in this chapter by examining how chromosomes pass from parents to offspring in sexual reproducing organisms. They're going to go over that. That's an important understanding. The second sentence here, the process of meiosis, a special type of cell division, okay, and if you don't know what meiosis is, then you should be one of those making a bold word that you're going to put a definition to. You run into something you do not know, whether it's in bold or not, find its definition. Go to the back of the book. Okay, in the back of the book, there's a glossary or a place to find the index to where it was first given its definition. You have to do that. For different people, it'll be different amounts. You can't be lazy here. You can't run into words and read them and not know what they are. Okay, so yeah, if you don't know what meiosis is, look it up. If you don't know what fertilization is, you're going to have to look it up. If you continue down the track of reading words you do not know, this becomes an impossibility in trying to understand this. This is going to take time and effort, and that's what this is about. But it'll make sense. The pieces will come together if you do that. So again, you'd put those definitions, okay, right here as you see them or run into them that you did not know. Okay, I'm not going to have to show you that. But the game plan is very important. So what I'm looking for now, okay, is I'm looking for what the game plan is. And you can write game plan. I don't care. It might be hyphenated, but the game plan, probably 2 words. Okay, so what's the game plan of the unit? Okay, well, the first thing is to do what? Learn how chromosomes pass from parents to offspring in sexual reproducing organisms. Okay, so we're going to learn number 1, and it's good. This is a good foreshadowing. Knowing what we're going to hear and see is a good way of kind of getting your brain warmed up to what you're reading. You shouldn't be reading something like, what am I reading? You should know what you're reading from and where you're going to understand this. So game plan. How are, what's it say here? I'm looking from your books, how are chromosomes passed? And you may say, what's a chromosome? Okay, now you're going to have to, under where your running list of definitions are, okay, and you can put that definition any place in your chapter. It doesn't have to be any particular place, but you should be clear of what a definition place is. Okay, so how are chromosomes passed from parents to offspring? Now, hopefully you know what offspring is. Again, you can't just write these words and not know what they mean. You have to figure out these definitions. I know it takes work, but that's what this course is about. It's a lot of information. There's a lot of moving parts and a lot of pieces, micro and macro, that fit together. So you're going to have to start battling this way. Okay, what's the other part? The process of meiosis and fertilization maintain a species chromosome count during the sexual life cycle. So you can write something like that. So the process of meiosis. Now, what's meiosis? Okay, you might have to look up what meiosis is. All right. Okay, describe. And again, I'm not going to continue on this. So the game plan 2 would be learning about meiosis and fertilization that maintain a species chromosome count during the sexual life cycle. Okay, and that, you don't have to make it all fancy. The third you could say is they learn about cellular mechanics of meiosis and explain how this process differs from mitosis. Or you can just say, listen, learn meiosis versus mitosis. And then 4, you could write, we will consider how both meiosis and fertilization contribute to genetic variation. Okay, and again, because you may not understand exactly what we're saying here, but at least we're learning what the game plan is of what this unit's looking to do. You must do it this way. If you just blanketly read, you're not going to know what you're going to do. So you start a chapter, write the chapter down. You talk about start putting titles and seeing what they're saying in each title. Write down anything you run in, any word you do not know, you're going to have to look it up. You're going to go right to the index of the back of the book, look it up like you would in a dictionary. Find the page it was first introduced and spend some time reading. Sometimes you're going to have to go back before you go forward. That's just the way it has to be, okay? And that's what good reading and science learning is all about. All right. So we have our game plan, which was our 4 list of things that we're going to cover. So if you go to your reading, they're going to start. Now, of course, yours started on 248, mine's 247, doesn't matter, but concept 13.1, yeah, you're going to write this, okay? So you're going to go concept 13.1. All right, I'm putting this over here. This is a big thing. So concept 13.1 tells me I'm in what? Chapter 13. And what is that concept? Offspring, acquire, genes. I'm writing this word for word. From parents, by, no, I can't spell parents, or I just can't type, or both, by inheriting, and I need to be able to see what I'm doing here. Let's make this bigger. Inheriting what? Inheriting chromosomes. Again, if you don't know what a chromosome is, you may have to look it up. You know, it will be discussed in later parts of this unit, so you can hang on. Okay, you're not going to know everything, but my friends in chemistry, my friends in biology, okay, we're going to figure this out. So offspring acquire genes from parents by inheriting chromosomes. Okay, and of course chromosomes, of course, carry the genes which are in the DNA, okay, that basically is our genetic code and things we're going to learn. All right, so that's the major title. So now what am I going to write here? Am I going to write word for word what the paragraph is all about? No. Okay, I'm going to now read the entire part of this. Family and friends may tell you that you have your mother's freckles, your father's eyes. Of course, parents do not, in any literal sense, give their children freckles, eyes, hair, or any other traits. What then is actually inherited? Okay, so in this section, okay, this concept, if you look in your book, okay, on 249, you're going to see inheritance of genes. Okay, that's going to be a subset of this, and that's what you have to organize your thinking. So the first game plan was how are chromosomes, how are chromosomes passed from parents to, or how are chromosomes, I guess I should have said passed or transmitted from parents to offspring. Okay, now this is the first concept. The game plan was to cover this, so we're going to cover this. But if you look, how is this going to be covered in the book? It's got a couple different subtitles: inheritance of genes, comparison of asexual and sexual reproduction. Okay, so it's got 2 subsets. So you're going to write them. Okay, not much was written in that first little paragraph underneath it, not enough for me to put anything there, unless you think there was something you needed. Again, the whole point of this is not to just write everything you see, but pull out the important pieces so you can go back to this quickly. Okay, so here we go. We're going to put a subset of this is going to be inheritance. Notice I'm indenting it, inheritance. I don't know why I'm changing to red. Oh, is that red? Okay, inheritance of genes. Notice chapter 13 is all the way to the left. This is indented a little more, and this is under, so inheritance of genes. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the 1, 2, 3, 4 paragraphs and try to put my own words. And I shouldn't put more than 3 or 4 sentences. Maybe I need less, maybe I need a little bit more, but it should not be any more than that. So I'm going to have to really read this. Okay, if I look at the first paragraph, parents endow their offspring with coded information in the form of hereditary units called genes. Okay, well that essentially is a what? A definition. So I probably want to go there, genes, and just put what that is. Okay, so coded information. If I could type, it'd be helpful. Okay, coded information. In what? I'm going to use that word here. I like the word hereditary units, since we already defined it. Let's see. Hereditary units. Coded information in hereditary units. The genes we inherit from our mothers and fathers are our genetic link to our parents, and they account for family resemblances such as shared eye color or freckles. Our genes program the specific traits that emerge as we develop from fertilized egg. Now that seems to be an important sentence right there. If I was to look at one sentence of that entire paragraph that just jumps out at me, is that one. Besides the definition, that one right there. So our genes, okay, program the specific traits. Yes, and I am using this, in this case, word for word, but I'm taking what I thought is one sentence, the end of this paragraph, that kind of summarize the entire paragraph. That's important. Our genes program the specific traits, and it's okay to do this, that emerge as we develop from fertilized eggs. Okay? Into adults if you have to. Okay? So that's a pretty major. Next, the paragraph. The genetic information was written in the language of DNA, the polymer of 4 different mononucleotides you learn about in chapters 1 through 5. Now, we haven't read about those chapters, but it's not important right now for you to know these specifics to do what I need you to do. Okay, just trust me in what I'm trying to do here. Inherited information is passed in the form of each gene-specific sequence of the DNA nucleotides, much as printed information is communicated in the form of meaningful sequences or letters. That seems pretty important, that our genes program the specific traits that emerge. What are those specific things? Well, it's a specific sequence of DNA nucleotides. That's what it is. Okay, so that to me seems to be an important piece here. Okay, so we would say a specific sequence of what? DNA nucleotides, okay? Now again, if it really troubles you that you don't know what a DNA nucleotide is, you can go back and you can read on that. I'm telling you, you don't have to know all this, but that's what this is about, okay? Again, there's little tiny details that go back and forth. They're going to pull on you to know the tiny details, but I'm trying to keep you looking at the big picture here, and there's a reason behind the madness. Okay, in both cases, language is in symbolic. Just as your brain translates the word apple into a mental image, cells translate genes into freckles and other features. We've kind of said that already. Most genes program cells to synthesize specific enzymes and other proteins whose cumulative action produces the organism's inherited traits. Okay, the program of these traits in the form is one of the unifying themes in biology. I kind of like this idea here. Most genes program cells to synthesize specific enzymes and other proteins whose total action, cumulative, produces. Now, if you didn't know what cumulative, you have to look that up. Okay, produces an organism's inherited traits. I'm not going to sit here and say that this book is the easiest read. It's not, but it is excellent in terms of what it's trying to do. Okay, so you could definitely have, we're going to learn more about those things, but we're going to go on. So where are we? The first thing is, how are, again, what's the game plan here? Don't get lost in the reading. How are chromosomes passed from parents to offspring? Well, we're learning about genes, and that's why the information of these hereditary traits are passed along. And guess what? They're coded with specific DNA sequences. Okay, it's about those sequences. And what we just learned here is that genes program cells to synthesize proteins. Okay, so that's pretty important. Okay, genes tell what? Okay, tell the cell to make certain proteins. That's important. That eventually give us traits. I'm putting this in my own words, okay? So it's tied to that, all right? Or inheritable traits. That's probably a better word, inheritable. Give us inheritable. Inheritable, if you didn't know that, look it up. But again, we just kind of touched on that. I hope you're seeing what I'm trying to do here. Not a lot. I'm sure it's not a lot of fun. Okay, so next, transmission of hereditary traits has its molecular basis in the precise replication of DNA, which produces a copy of genes that are passed from parents to offspring. In animals or plants, reproductive cells called gametes are the vehicles that transmit genes from one generation to the next. So yeah, this is a time to introduce your next word, okay? Gametes. And what are those? Okay, and of course you can write that definition, all right? And you can see what I'm trying to do here. Okay, so you're going to read through and try to get, again, try to get the most important pieces of information from each of these paragraphs and see if you actually have solved for the first part of the game plan. How are chromosomes passed? Okay, as you notice in the first game plan here, how are chromosomes passed, there are 2 points. There's 2 subsets, inherited genes and comparison of asexual and sexual reproduction. That's the next subset here. And you would write that, okay, equal to the inheritance of genes. Maybe this would be underlined or so forth. And that's how you organize this to do that. So I'd write, after I get done with those last couple of paragraphs, reading them and understanding what they're after, okay, by making these notes, I'd write comparison of asexual reproduction, and I would do the same thing. Notice that would complete. And after you do comparison of asexual reproduction, completing those 3 paragraphs, that should complete the first game plan. Now, how are chromosomes, okay, or at least it should take away offspring acquired genes from parents, okay? And then we would turn the page to 250, there you go, concept 3.2, okay, which you would start with, again, another set of information. And that's how the breakdown goes. Now, when you read about a particular study, like they're talking about karyotypes, preparing a karyotype, you may want to say karyotype, page 250. It might be important to do that as well to remind yourself that this study, because you're going to walk into a lot of different places where they're going to do some studies, and the studies are important to read, definitely. Okay, so yes, figure 3.3, I want you to write some notes on preparing a karyotype. And you would say, you know, the karyotype, maybe a couple sentences, and then for more information, say page 250. So you would say karyotype, I can type karyotype, and you would say page 250. Now you probably want to say, obviously, talk a little bit, a couple of sentences about it, but then for more information. The idea here is that you're going to basically read the textbook, pull out information that's important, figure out what you don't know, and understand the flow, the game plan from the beginning, and see if you're accomplishing out what the author is set to do. It's a different way of reading. It takes work, but this is how you internalize information. Okay, so your first assignment, I have set down in front of you the couple of chapters that I want you to do this with. Please do not make any notes on page 254 and 255. You certainly can read them, okay? And certainly on 256, that figure 13.9, I'm not asking you to rewrite that. Make some couple of points that you think that are important, that show me your understanding, okay? And go through the reading this way, all right? It's going to take some effort, but you're really going to internalize it. You're not just reading words here, you're understanding, seeing if it connects. After you're done with the chapter, go back to the game plan, to the first The first paragraph in the chapter, to see if you in fact did what you set out to do. It's kind of like an objective to the reading. When you go to 14 or the next unit, go find that first couple paragraphs that describes the game plan, and you're going to do this for every unit, and I will definitely be visiting your work when it's on a Google Doc and making my my suggestions and giving you some feedback to see how you're doing. Good luck, okay?